Has anyone ever been to a wedding where someone actually objected, and if so, how did that go? Yes, at my cousin's, the bride's ex showed up, and when he stood up to object, my uncles grabbed him and bum rushed him out of the church and gave him a tune-up in the parking lot. Catholic wedding, of course. I don't know if it's a UK thing or even just a one specific church thing, but I was told by the priest in a rehearsal that if someone objects, even as a joke, the priest is required to pause the ceremony and talk to the objector alone to discuss their concerns and decide if they have a valid objection. Like, it's not a fun jokey moment, it's a real legal part of the ceremony. He also said it used to be custom that if you raised an invalid objection you then had to pay for the wedding. I went to a wedding where the best man was replaced a week before because he banged the bride. But the wedding still went ahead, just with a different best man. They are divorced now. My auntie's fiancé was already married. Lady stood up waving marriage cert, so wedding didn't go ahead. The reception was on a long boat, so we still went to that. The fiancé went back to home country to sort it out and never came back. Went to a wedding where they skipped that part because the bride's adult daughter was planning to object. Not quite the question as asked, but too funny to not share. Priest: any objections? Father of the bride lets out the hardest, loudest, most complex sounding sneeze I've ever heard in my life, completely with involuntarily saying "aku." Mother of the bride: hammered on champagne, for fuck's sake, Jerry. It took a good 5 minutes for everyone to regain their composure. I was at one where the groom thanked the bride's ex for dying as his loss was my gain. Didn't help the sons of his bride and ex were in attendance. At his rehearsal dinner, a co-worker's mother toast included that his soon-to-be wife was a damn dirty whore who wasn't good enough for her son. Folks not happy. Video ended, so didn't see the whole thing. At wedding which I attended, his mom started to say something at the speak now part but was silenced by her daughter. Mom left and didn't see the rest of the ceremony. Everything about that poor guy was drama. A woman, in her 20s at the time, objected to her mom marrying my uncle. So she started yelling, "Mom, don't marry him," during the ceremony. The ceremony proceeded and some family on the mom's side lead the daughter away to quit interrupting. I don't blame her, my uncle was a lying, lazy bastard. The marriage didn't last. Oldie but a goodie, this happened back in the 70s, this was shared to love by the guy who married my parents. It went something like this. Does anyone object to this union? I do, that's my husband. So they paused the wedding, the bride, groom and the woman objecting went into a small room. The woman who objected provided documentation showing the groom was still legally her husband. Apparently the couple had started divorce proceedings some time earlier but never finished. The wedding was cancelled and everyone sent home. I went to a Catholic wedding where, when the priest asked this question, one of the groomsmen did a very loud, long, throat clearing, which got everyone laughing. Everyone except for the bride's elderly Italian grandmother, who marched out of her seat and angrily hit the groomsman with her handbag and shouted at him in Italian. A friend of mine has a band that plays lots of weddings and other parties. They were hired for a birthday party that turned out to be a surprise wedding. The guy surprised his GF with a proposal and wanted to have a wedding ceremony then and there. She said no and left. Kind of. My uncle was getting married. Small, just a handful of family and a minister. I was videotaping. My grandmother was not into it at all. With each line spoken by the minister, she had a cutting, sarcastic response. I could not believe it. It was so unlike her. When that part came up, she said, "I object." But does it really matter? They are going to do it anyway. The minister just ignored her and proceeded, business as usual. They were divorced within a year. Wish I had a copy. Groom found out that bride was cheating 2 days before the wedding day. He spilled the beans while exchanging the vows. A relative visited one ceremony where it was asked if anyone objects, and the groom decided it's a good time for a joke and said I do. The lady who was going to marry the couple just turned and left. They had to go through all the paperwork again and change the date. Got married, divorced in like 3 years if I remember correctly. I objected. I took giving my sister away literally. I wasn't the brightest 3-year-old. The mom of one of the bridesmaids got up and yelled, "Yeah, I object, you fucking stole him from her," while pointing at the bride. I've known the groom for a long time and by proxy the bride. I am still very good friends with them. I have never seen her more infuriated than at that moment. The bridesmaid got up from her chair and was like, "I'm so sorry. Let me get her out of here." The bridesmaid and the bride's stepfather escorted the woman out of the wedding and it continued. My mum told me she was going to pay an old boyfriend to stand up and object at my wedding. She didn't in the end, but I did cast a quick look around in the church before walking down the aisle. In my cousin's wedding, her friend said I object because she was not invited to the wedding. She was kicked out of the wedding. One of my cousins is married to literally one of the kindest and coolest dudes I have ever met. Before the wedding, her little sister was saying how she's marrying my best friend. At the wedding, when the priest dude asks if anyone objects, the room is dead quiet and all you hear is a little girlish whisper, "I do." It was honestly really adorable and we all laughed, and my cousin's husband and her little sister are still best friends. Not a wedding I attended, but my best friend went to her aunt's wedding. Aunt's future toxic MIL whips out proof from ancestry that they're actually first cousins. Wedding was cancelled, and the bridegroom haven't spoken since. I worked a wedding where one of the moms objected, but I think the groom knew that the parent was going to say something, so they just responded with, "Oh, sit down, parent's name, we knew you didn't like this a year ago and clearly we're not going to change our minds today." The wedding continued like nothing happened, but the mom was low-key shunned and people avoided her at the reception. Not exactly an objection, but the wedding was on a boat no one could leave and the groom was Jewish and marrying a Mexican Catholic woman. The groom neglected to tell his family it was a full Catholic wedding and the groom's family stood up and pitched a fit when they realized the groom was going to take communion. The uncle who sponsored his bar mitzvah stood up and announced that the groom was a disgrace to the family and walked downstairs. The reception was a shit show. When my sister got married, they had the pastor skip over that part. I think she knew none of us could stand him. I don't think anyone would have spoken up to object, but the unity candle would not light. So, in a way, I feel like that was God's way of objecting. Or just irony at its best. Divorced about 8 years later after the abusive cheating asshole was found out. So glad he is gone. My grandmother objected at my sister's wedding. My sister was a Florida-based Italian Catholic and somewhat conservative individual who fell in love with a progressive New York Jew. My nonna said it wouldn't work and it would change one of them and she was worried about it changing her granddaughter. My parents managed to get her away from the wedding and it continued. My sister is now neither Catholic or conservative, so my nonna was absolutely right. My brother's wedding, the wife's older brother objected because of political differences lol. He was asked to leave by the bride's father. Or forever hold your peace. Man stands up. Bride sit the fuck back down. Man sits back down. Well, sort of. It was staged, pre-arranged, and the minister was warned ahead of time. The couple said they wanted to make the ceremony more interesting. So they had a friend object, declaring his love for the bride in an over-the-top dramatic speech. The best man, my husband, stabbed the guy with a stage dagger, he played dead, and 2 of the other groomsmen dragged his limp body away. The wedding proceeded. I have to say, it was pretty awesome. The bride and groom are still happily married 30 years